Circa 66 million years BCE, the Cretaceous period. Now, the great race of Yith are wiped out by the now overwhelming flying polyps. The original narcotic manuscript scrolls are lost or destroyed. The great race flee once again to other bodies. Remember, they can make their minds travel through time and space to other bodies. They fling them out far into the future. That's enough there. Now, this is my little note to self here. I've put here, this is a may or may not happen. This is not based on any particular things that that's true or not. It's just an idea. So I'm saying the Yiths may swap minds with another race called the Zobnarians to maintain a record of their race, and perhaps another reason to preserve the esoteric knowledge of the narcotic manuscripts in this Earth timeline. This might be done in general exchange terms or at the point of the Yith's extinction event with the polyps. Yeah, well, as I say, I haven't read this for a while. I've got to read this loads of time. Now we're coming up to a more relevant period to Polaris. So we've got 0.1.4 Zobna, circa 56 million years BCE. Now I'm saying here that the Zobnarians are established in the Arctic Sea near the North Pole. Who are the Zobnarians? They're another race of people. They could possibly have come via an alien craft, perhaps. That's just my supposition there. But who knows? But let's run with that for the moment. At this time, and for the next 200,000 years, this area is in a subtropical state, the Arctic, and it actually was during this period. So I'm trying to tie in different things that I've read in Lovecraftian stories with what I've researched for Earth history, so get a sort of rough date, give or take a few, a million years or so. So I've said the Zobnarians, perhaps another migrant alien race, are humanoid Nordic aliens with long lifespans and have been studying the Earth for some time. Perhaps to influence the development of a human species as a potential colony, or maybe to investigate the Yith. The ship, this is my supposition here, this is my sort of elaboration here, becomes the center for the now marooned and now Zobnarian civilization and provides energy and technology to develop their new land of Zobna, which is a great center for culture and learning. The Zobnarians continue to study and add to the narcotic manuscripts. I've put here, Zobna could be an origin myth for, or an origin for the Atlantis myth, perhaps. Or another of those Atlantis types myths. Jumping again to 55.8 million years, the subtropical Arctic climate begins to change and get colder. And then again, at 5 million years BCE, we have, according to some sources, the first Hyperborean period established in northern Europe, which is at this time warm and fertile, inhabited by the Lovecraftian Vuamis and the Notheks, or the Nothkes. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. Let's call them the Notheks for the moment. And then we say later the Vuamis drive the Notheks out to Lomar. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that right, but never mind for the moment. Circa 3 million years BCE, the first Homo genus evolved. So here we come, boys and girls. Circa 2.5 million years BCE, the start of the current Ice Age. What we know as the Ice Age. This is when it started. Remember, there were lots of Ice Ages in Earth history. Now, if you relate this back to Lovecraft, you could say that this was allegedly started by the escaping Afum-Zar from under the North Pole, and also another Lovecraftian deity, Ithaqua, around the Cenozoic era in the Tertiary period. The Elder Things retreat forever to their last underwater cities. Circa 150,000 years BCE, the first Homo sapiens start to evolve. And I'm intrigued to maybe look at other sort of religious texts as well, to see if some of those sort of ideas fit in. Who knows? I don't know. The Zobnarians start to abandon Zobna as the increasing ice sheets continue to advance and their ship's energy source begins to fail. Remember that the ship thing is me imposing that. It might not be a ship. I'm just saying that's an idea that I kind of like. The ice breaches the ship and it sinks. The Zobnarian exodus takes them south to Lomar, which is modern-day Greenland, where it is warmer in the south. During their journey across the northern mountains, they clash with the now Ethikwa worshipping Nofex, eventually beating them back. Lomar is established with the capital Olatho in the south on the plateau of Sarkis between the peaks Norton and Cardiophonic. Lomar may have some advanced technology and flourishes for 100,000 years. Some of that's, again, my elaboration. Circa 60,000 years BCE, Homo sapien begin to move out of Africa. Now I'm saying perhaps some interbreeding eventually takes place between the Lemurians and Homo sapiens. Now I've got Lomar. This is where Lomar happens, and I've got this 55,000 years BCE. The Anutos invade Lomar. The Anutos coming over from Canada, or modern Canada. No, my printer's gone wrong here. This is the story of Polaris. So all the Lemurian warriors have been dispatched by Alos, the commander-in-chief, and the man in the Polaris story, now a student of the narcotic manuscripts, has been ordered to keep watch for the advancing army at the garrison citadel in the watchtower of Thapnan that looks over the valley of Banoff and lies by the narrow valley at the foot of Peak Norton. He is to signal with fire if he sees the Anutos. The man stares at Polaris through an opening in the roof. It calls to him and he tries to fathom its message through his studies of the narcotic manuscripts, but eventually falls asleep and dreams. And we know what happens to him in the next part of Polaris. But in this timeline, that's all that happens, you see. And then I've got go to my timeline 2.2, which if you follow the man story, that's where you'd go. So you'd find him waking up back in his swamp, right? Now, the Anutos eventually overthrow the city via Banoff and the Polaris story, etc. The Zobnarian narcotic manuscripts are destroyed, with their knowledge being guarded in the minds of a few loyal priests who flee with others southward. These Lemurian migrants disperse in tribes throughout the world. Over the years, some are said to have settled in New Hyperborea, and others in North America, Massachusetts area, and perhaps underground too. Years later, the Gnophex attack and overthrow Olatho from the Anutos, destroying both, with only some Anutos surviving. On the way to New Hyperborea, a magical gateway opens up, leading to the Dreamlands. This is all things how I can try to work out how the narcotic manuscripts ended up in Ulthar in the Dreamlands. I know I'm going off on one here, but this is how research goes. You know, you go down a rabbit hole and you see how far it goes. And believe me, this has gone very deep. So I'm just going to keep going anyway for a while. Hopefully you find it interesting. One of the Lemurian migrant, passes through this magic portal gateway and ends up creating a copy of the narcotic manuscripts, which ends up in the Temple of the Elder Ones in Ulthar. The rest of the migrant party make it to New Hyperborea, where the secretive cult, the Narcotic Brotherhood, is formed to protect the narcotic knowledge. In New Hyperborea, the Vermis add their own additions to the narcotic manuscripts. Later, the Lemurians may kill the Vermis. New copies of the manuscripts are made and eventually, in historical times, translated into Greek, which is then called the Narcotica, and later into English. And also, for those who are interested, there is talk of at some point during the history of the narcotic manuscripts that a copy was made onto metal plates, which is what inspired the little prop that I made in the shed, and also appears in the in all the promotional material. Okay, so there is bearing for it. Circa 26,500 years BCE is the period of max glacification in the Ice Age, the thickest ice recorded. Okay, that's a true record. Circa 20,000 years BCE, in the second Hyperborean period, is now established around the Gulf of Finland, where we have humans, zoomis, and other species. Circa 12,000 years BCE is the end of the current, what we call Ice Age, and also the time of the biblical flood, allegedly. Question mark. Yeah, so, there you go. Circa 3,000 years BCE, I'm now allegedly saying the biblical Tower of Babel is perhaps destroyed in the Middle East. These are just little ideas. Trying to find a chronology. And now we've got the timeline number 2, which, so we're finished with the prehistorical period. I'll just read that last one again. So the last date of prehistory I've got is circa 3,000 years BCE. Okay. Yeah. Remembering that the period of prehistory here we are. Prehistory goes up to 3,500 BCE. So I'm coming out of the prehistorical period at 3,000 years BCE. 3,500 years BCE is when the first recorded language is discovered. So we're talking cuneiform, those sort of languages leading up to hieroglyphics and all that in the latter years. But that's the idea. It's all to do with language. It's funny that, isn't it? Interesting. Okay, so now we're in the historical periods from 3,500 upwards. So we're starting with a period 2.1, which is in 1920 CE, current era, like we used to say AD. Okay, so we're going now to Lafayette Swamp, south of New Orleans, USA. My printer's double printing here, so I can't read this very well. Surrounded by swamp mist, which could be an avatar of Nyarlathotep. The man stares at Polaris. I don't know if I should give you all these secrets away. I'm going to stop. I'm not going to read all these things out. All right. There's a great aurora in the sky. This is more Polaris story here. Yeah, the man begins to lucidly dream of a city and a foreign people. He becomes fascinated, obsessed with the dream, getting closer and more involved each time he falls asleep. After his first dream of the city, he feels not as he had been. That's not as he had. 5 words that indicate quite a lot and are there to be unwrapped. I shall say no more. Experiencing a vaguer recollection within his soul. Again, that's interesting. A vaguer recollection within his soul. A recollection rather than a dream. Now, first when I've read this story, I thought it was, especially because it was the first story in the dream cycle. I made, I think, a wrong assumption that it was all in the dream worlds and stuff like that, but it's not. It's a recollection of something past. So he's talking about something that happened in his ancient ancestral past that he's connected with. This vaguer recollection within his soul, it really touches him deep. So he starts to question reality. One night when he dreams of the city, he suddenly becomes corporeal, conscious of his Lemurian body, life history, and instantly understands where he is. Polaris. Okay, and then we can go back to our prehistory point of chronology that I read out earlier. But let's carry on with this timeline. 2.2, 1920, sometime later. Same place, in the swamp, south of New Orleans. The man wakes up once more in his swamp house, but still with the living consciousness of his time in Olatho. That's the city, remember. He is disoriented and thinks he is dreaming. He sees the once familiar people around him, but considers them dream creatures. So I've gone into Avon. He tries to convince them to make him wake up so he can save the city from the Anutos, but they laugh at him and say he is mad. The man is consumed by guilt as Polaris continues to look down on him. And that's the end. That's the end. That's the end of the chronology. There's a lot in there, isn't there? And when you think that the last two paragraphs and a third that I read out earlier in prehistory are the only ones in the Polaris story, but all the rest of it has been generated from these small pieces of text. So I'm going to leave that there, and I've gone on for 31 minutes. I may have to split this up into several parts, so I hope this hasn't been boring. I'm trying to be as honest as I can, charting the process of my thoughts and the development of the piece. So hopefully that's all right. Next time we'll look at the Sabbaton Polaris Bible. Now we've got this chronology. Okay, so that's enough for now. So see you next time. Vertagen. End.